Number 17, let's complete the text. Data collected by the Mars rover Curiosity at the Gale Crater's Murray Formation are suggestive of hydrological deposition of sediment in the distant past. To characterize the nature of the depositional environment, they analyzed the grain size of Murray Formation sediment, finding that although there are intervals of coarse grains, most of the sediment consists of fine grains that show signs of cracking due to episodic desiccation. They concluded that the coarse grains are sandstone, which tends to be deposited by flowing water, whereas the fine grains are mudstone, which is slowly deposited by settling at a suspension in low flow water, leading the researchers to posit that. So this part here is very important. We have these intervals of coarse grains that are interrupting what are otherwise kind of layers of fine grains, right? So you have some fine grains. Here's your fine grain layer, and then you got a coarse grain layer, and then a fine grain layer, and a coarse grain layer, and a fine grain layer, and a coarse grain layer. And they say that the fine grains are caused by low flow water. So that's going to be water, presumably, that's not moving much, if at all. And then the coarse are deposited by flowing water. So this suggests something about the water in this place, how it was moving or not moving at various times, episodically or in intervals. So let's go to the choices and see what works. A, although the area of the Murray Formation experienced a prolonged period of dryness that prevented a lake from forming, water flowing from a distant source was present. This can't work because we need a lake, presumably, or some kind of standing water, some kind of low flow water, in order for the fine-grained mudstone to have deposited in this area. So this is the problem ultimately with A. We need a lake. At some point, or through actually for a lot of the period, there should be a lake present, given that most of the fine grains are present. It was mostly fine grains. So let's look at B. A lake existed at the Murray Formation for a prolonged period. Okay, better than A. Though the lake occasionally experienced drying, and there were periods in which one or more streams were present. Good. So we have streams at various times that are going to deposit the coarse grains. Otherwise, for a prolonged period, there was a lake. Occasionally, that lake would dry up, and there'd be streams present instead. That fits perfectly. Now, we didn't necessarily need this to get this answer, I don't think, but we have this vocabulary word desiccation. You might be able to tell from context that if it's cracking, that means it's drying out. But yeah, desiccation just means drying out. And that also is consistent with what we saw in B, with this experienced drying bit. So all the elements that are reflected in what we found in these particles, in these sediment, and the processes that might have deposited them, we find in B. So it's hitting all the marks. That's a good sign. Let's look at C. One or more streams existed at the Murray Formation for an extended period. I'm a little worried about this because the whole point is the coarse grains were only occasional, not extended. But until being replaced by a lake that persisted for only a brief period before permanently drying. This seems to me to miss the relationship here. The lake should be around for most of the time, given that most of the particles are fine-grained, whereas the streams should only be there once in a while. The idea that the lake was only around for a brief period and then permanently dried is just not consistent with the findings of this deposition. D, a stream-fed lake was present at the Murray Formation for an extended period. Okay. And although the streams experience occasional drying, the lake did not. Well, that seems to be a problem, right? Because we do see the grains, the fine-grained, show signs of cracking due to episodic desiccation. So that means the lake must have dried up on some level, like in some way, at some point. So to say that the lake did not experience drying, I think is a problem here. They don't also talk about whether the streams were short-lived in the way that choice B does. Right, B says that the streams were kind of present only occasionally, whereas D makes it seem like the streams are permanent, which doesn't seem to make sense. It also shows this distinction between the streams and the lake. And the streams drying don't really matter because, well, I guess the streams drying would mean there'd be no streams anymore, which means no coarse deposition. So maybe I'm okay with that. But again, the lake not drying is really the big problem here. So let's get rid of D, and best answer is then B.